Okay, here we go. Jason, can you hear me okay?
Really fine, Brian.
Excellent. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you and welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate it. We had a great turnout. This session's being recorded. So for those of you watching it live, excellent. For those of you that watch it recorded, you'll get the full effect as well, including the Q&A, which will drop in during the presentation and probably at the end if we have time. Speaking of that, if you have questions that you want answered during or after the session, drop them right into the comments field that you have there on LinkedIn. And we'll do our best to get to them during the presentation. My name is Brian Galonic. I'm thrilled here to be with you today together with Jason Anker. The topic of conversation is the human equation, unlocking safety, well-being, and the science of engagement. So I would love to just jump right in and I'm gonna go through here real quickly and then I'll introduce Jason. So our agenda is, well, we're the expert panels, myself, Jason, and at the end here, Tim Marsh will probably jump on as well. We're going to talk about the reality of engagement. I don't think anybody on the phone, anybody on this listening to this right now would say that they don't think engagement matters. I'm pretty sure the mantra that employee engagement is a big deal years by now. The question is whether or not you fully embrace how important it is, if you fully understand how pervasive it is and how important it is and how beneficial it can be in what you're doing every day, and then the ways in which to get your employees more engaged with a goal of safety at the end. And so what we're really going to do here today is connect safety, wellness, and employee engagement. And as it says here, talk about some real life examples. And so there is no more real life example that I can turn to right now than Jason Anker. I'm not going to bore you by reading our bios. What I'd rather have Jason do is just introduce himself, tell you a little bit about himself and why he's joining this discussion.
Well, firstly, thank you, Brian, for inviting me to share my thoughts on, I think, a very important subject. I've been speaking now for 16 years after suffering a life-changing accident on a building site in 1993 when I was just 24 years old, when I fell off a ladder on a building site, doing a job that I knew was unsafe, and I chose not to speak up. As a result of the accident, I now use a wheelchair. I'm paralysed from the waist down. I really struggled after my accident. And then starting the company in 2009, where I shared my story, a story of my accident, the impact on my life, the impact on family and friends. Things most people don't hear about. It wasn't just the accident being in a wheelchair. It was me learning to deal with mental health issues, being incontinent, marriage breakdown. I turned to drink and drugs. So I've really struggled for a lot of years. And actually, if I share my story, it's actually a thing that's probably saved me of all the things I've done. So that's sort of a brief introduction. I know we'll go into a few more details around the accident as we continue. But like I said, I've been sharing my story now for 16 years. Started off a very typical story of don't be like me. Speak up if you're unsafe. Don't be like me. And then probably moving into the well-being piece and linking the two things together. Looking at my mental health breakdown in the year before my accident had played a significant role in my choice not to speak up. So very brief, that's a quick introduction to who I am.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. And for those that haven't, please check out Anker Marsh. You'll be amazed at what you see online. Jason and his partner Tim Marsh are out there hitting this theme, this important topic, time and time again about health, mental health, and physical health, and well-being, and all of it, and how it connects to safety. And so there will be a second presentation a week from today at the exact same time between myself and Tim Marsh, where we're going to spend more time. Jason and I clearly will hit on it a bit today, but Tim and I will spend some more time in the next presentation talking about mental health and that connection as well, and how important it is. I'm Brian Galonic, as you can see from my bio there. I've been in the space that basically helps motivate human behavior, particularly within companies. So my company specifically helps our customers build programs that help them engage, motivate, and reward the people behind their success. And we spend most of our time helping companies figure out how to better engage with their employees to create a safety result. And a big chunk of that is tied to wellness and well-being as well. And there is a way to do it, and it works every single time if you get it right. If you put emphasis, if you put recognition and rewards on top of the proper behavior as it relates to health and wellness. You will get more of the same. And that's what we're here to share with all of you today, and kind of tie those two things together, those three things together, really: safety, wellness, and employee engagement. So I usually start off I almost always start off my presentations with this state of the American workplace. By the way, Jason's joining us from London, as is Tim. And so I probably should be quoting the state of the global workplace. But the study results are very similar. And what you see there on screen, those yellow bars that probably look almost the same, aren't quite the same. And the small differences are telling. You can see that just pre-COVID, things had gotten pretty darn good in 2019 in relative terms, 2017, 2019. And then, since COVID has kind of took a bit of a turn for the worse and swinging back in the other direction on a very small scale. But the bottom line is that about 15 to 17% of your workforce are actively disengaged, just bad workers. On average, company's workforce, yours might be better, yours might be worse, but on average, 15 to 17% of your employees are what we call brand detractors. Not only do they not believe in your brand, not only are they not thrilled to work for your company, they're there for the paycheck and don't care about much else. Many of them are lost causes, but some of them can be moved into a more productive group. About a third of your employees, thankfully, the 30% or so, are actively engaged. When their feet hits the floor in the morning, they're all in, they're ready to go, and they're good workers. And those people, for the programs that we create, generally speaking, are more of a thank you to those people. But the other 50 or 60% are a group of people that can be moved in the right direction to be better brand ambassadors, to be better employees, to be more attentive, to be healthier, to feel better about the companies they work for. And that's the group in particular. I mean, everybody can be motivated, but that's the group in particular when we build out these recognition programs that we can really target. And you see some of the numbers on screen there, very daunting. But the bottom line is it's about $500 billion a year. Disengaged workers cost the American workplace about $500 billion a year. So just a massive number and a huge opportunity for companies to improve. And the extension of that is this slide here. And then I'll see what Jason's comments on this part about it, the employee engagement part, which is that if you're in the top 25%, just internalize this if you could, please. If your company, no matter what you do, I don't care if you're in oil and gas, I don't care if you're in construction, logging, mining, I don't care if you're a legal law firm, whatever, financial institution, take your pick, hospital. If you're in the top 25% on a single metric, your employee engagement, that Gallup State of the American Workplace or State of the Global Workplace uses 12 questions. If using those, and by the way, Willis Towers Watson and McLean Company and others, they've done the same studies. Everybody's got the same baseline data. If your company is in the top 25% compared to your competitors in terms of how engaged your employees are, just that one metric, how engaged are my employees? If you're in the top 25% and you compare yourself to a company that's in the bottom 25%, this is what you enjoy. Far lower absenteeism, much better patient care if you're a hospital, far lower turnover, far fewer safety accidents and injuries. And of course, the flip side of that, the bottom row, you're much more likely to recommend, the employees are much more likely to recommend to their friends to go work for your company. You have much better customer engagement. You have much better productivity and profitability. So this is the slide where if you need to prove to your boss or your boss's boss that there's real money to be saved, even if it weren't for the obvious human nature of wanting to improve health and wellness and safety and have a more engaged and happier workforce, even if that didn't resonate enough with the C-suite, which it should, but even if it didn't, it's really a dollars and cents thing. There's money to be saved and lives to be saved in many ways by having higher levels of employee engagement within your company. I guess, Jason, let me just jump off there and hand it off to you and see what your thoughts are on the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a study in the UK done by one of the leading companies looking at the cost, because a lot of people get, we might think, oh, we've got a safety program in place, it's cost us this, that, and money. We can see by the stats each year that it's working or perceived to be working. So what's the point? What's the benefit in investing in wellbeing? And I think the latest study came out. I think they're basically saying for every £1 you invest in a proper wellbeing strategy, can recoup £5 back to the company. And all the things you mentioned, profit, presenteeism, absenteeism, all the things. So if we can actually prove there is a benefit, a financial benefit, as well as a moral benefit as well, obviously. And I think, in my viewpoint, I don't think there'd be many things that would have prevented my accident from happening. I don't think under the safety rule, the procedure, will have stopped me from doing what I did. You know, I was in a really bad place, really suffering my mental health. You know, I think that is the bit that's inspired me in a way to continue sharing my story. You know, it initially was all about an accident, don't be like me. And now it's more like be like me. Look how I've turned my life around, and realizing that the only thing that probably would change me from doing what I did in 1993, when I made that fatal mistake of ignoring my safety concerns, you know, didn't speak up, even though I knew the job was unsafe. But I know if I'd been in that place now where the company had invested a bit into our mental health, and I'd been look after my mental health as well, I truly my accident would not have happened. But I often say now is let's say on the day of my accident, it never happened. I got away with it. It was another near miss. You know, my accident never happened. But how would I've gone in from work that day? You know, I've still gone to the bar, had a few beers. I've still been home late. My marriage problems were still continued, and I don't think it'll be very long before that situation will erode again. So I think that's why I think the well-being piece is such a fundamental piece that needs to be in there. You know, and I think COVID really helped make everyone suddenly aware about what well-being was suddenly the word of the moment, wasn't it, during the COVID epidemic? And I think now people actually join the dots together a little bit, and companies are realizing that the well-being plays such a massive part in safety, in production, in quality, absenteeism, staff retention, staff recruitment. And I think you'll hear a lot more of this subject next week when you speak to Tim. But for me, I feel when I speak, and it happens occasionally still, not so much, but I know when I first started talking about well-being, I'd have a senior director of the company, probably head of safety, would come to me and say, I never know in all my years of doing this job around safety and health and safety that well-being actually was connected, which was a little bit quite alarming, but also I think we've probably not seen the value in well-being. We've not seen what well-being brings. And even today, I hear some of the comments, you know, some really respected safety professionals still challenge this part around well-being. You know, it's not our part, it's HR's department. Why are we getting mixed up in all this? But surely a more, and all what you said in the previous slides, surely an engaged worker who's come to work after a good night's sleep, who's had his breakfast in the morning, a good slow driving to work, surely he's a better worker and more aware, spatially aware and focused on his job than someone who's just rushing to work after a bad night, had a few beers, too many beers the night before, rushing to work with no breakfast, poor sleep. And I ask the question quite often, who would you rather have on your site or have in your facility today? And people suddenly go, well, that's so obvious. And yet we have missed it for so long. And I mentioned before, the only good thing I can see about the COVID epidemic we all went through was this suddenly awareness of what actually well-being can bring.
For sure. No, exactly. You know, my son, you know, just to bring this home for a second, my 23-year-old son has now worked for 3 different construction companies as an intern for 2 of those years. And he recently got out of college and he just started a job. So he's now had the opportunity to work for 3 different construction companies, all of them good size. And he likes the one he's at now the most. And the one he is at now is by far the most proactive in dealing with health, wellness, pre-shift stretching, take your pick, really paying attention to the health and safety of their workers. And he comes home with examples of it all day long, up to including the things that they have at their disposal to call an all-stop, to do behavior-based observations. They recognize and reward people for doing really proper behavior-based observations, and they get orders of magnitude more of them, and really good ones, right? They do the same thing around health, wellness, safety. When they ask people for safety suggestions, they ask people to identify hazards. And so by engaging with them at a regular, normal level and adding emphasis to it and showing it's part of the culture, we're able to obviously, hopefully, help this slide get better in the years to come. This is obviously tragic deaths in the workplace. It seems even wrong to mention the amount of dollars lost as a result of it. And those are the hard dollars, right? The soft dollars are 4 or 5x that, as Jason was mentioning earlier, right? So the cost of the problems that result from safety related accidents and injuries, whether they're tied to wellness or not, is just monumental. And so to further make that connection, which we're probably beating it up a little bit, but for good reason, I think it's it's one thing to say, I know in my own life, my wife tells me something like, yeah, I get it. Well, did I really internalize it? Right? Do I really get it? The next slide, I think, is going to just amaze everybody because it amazes me. It's something that's becoming very common, very well known out there now, which is the life expectancy of career drivers. But let me start with this one for sake of argument. For starters, I think most people know this. Career drivers tend to be less healthy, and in some cases far less healthy than other workers. And so the incidence of obesity is substantially higher. Obesity leads to sleep apnea. Sleep apnea leads to tired driving, and tired driving, of course, leads to accidents. And on top of everything else, it makes it hard to get your CDL and hold on to it. Certainly type 2 diabetes creeps in and what have you. And so when you talk about driver health and you talk about driver shortages and worker shortages, in some cases in this country and others, and you say to yourself, I want my good drivers to stay here. I want them to be here. I want them to have a good long career. I don't want them to be out sick. I certainly don't want them to die or die early. Then it really is a question of you come to work the next day, and it's not just about the normal processes and procedures you might have. It really is probably a time to take a step back and make sure you're engaging on the health and mental health side. And this is the slide I was talking about. Project 61, to my knowledge, it's emerged just in recent months or this year. But it really, or I should say late last year, but it really is just identification that the life expectancy of a career driver is 61. The life expectancy of an adult male in the United States is about 78, 77 or 78. So you're talking about 15, 16, 17 years less on average for a career driver. And we want people to get into driving. It can be a great career, but obviously if it can be done in a way that's more healthy than not. So this Project 61 really takes on that subject matter, which is to say that if we're not helping our drivers get healthy, we're not helping them in the way they most need it, right? And you can read the stats that Project 61 puts on their own website about the percentages that smoke and how much they sleep and how high their stress levels are and the accidents and injuries that come with it. And just to hit one more of those, and then I'll hand it back to Jason to comment on both of these. Stress is another one. And by the way, obesity and sleep apnea and tired driving are stressful, but so are other things, financial health and any number of other things, substance abuse and what have you, that can lead to stress. And of course, stress leads to injuries. And so just using those obvious connections, Jason, I don't know if you want to spend a little more time talking about that connectivity.
On your previous slide, I'm still in Tim's words here, but obviously he won't be speaking about this subject next week, is the similarities between being drunk and drinking alcohol. A tired person has the same physiology as someone who's actually drunk. I'm stealing that live from Tim. Obviously, I don't think Tim will speak about this next week. But it's that realization, you can be really, really tired. You might have not drank any alcohol, but because you're really, really tired, your physiology is very similar to being drunk. And obviously, these drivers and all the health-related stress stats you've got on the screen there, if you're tired as well, that links. Tim said, okay to mention it. That links directly to an accident. Surely, if someone's tired and unaware and not concentrating properly, and it's not the same physiology of being drunk, hence you're driving a big wagon. The potential for an accident is huge. Not on the individual, on the general public for them reasons. So it's a great stat to put, really.
For sure, no doubt about it. And again, stress. And you can talk about smoking and smoking's tobacco cessation. You can talk about visits to the doctor. I mean, obviously, if drivers are passing away at an average age, it's very early. In fact, and during their driving career, then you can imagine that they very often. Again, you saw the stats on the previous slide. Thankfully, there's far fewer accidents. It doesn't necessarily lead to. Far more of these drivers are going to pass away from heart disease and cancer and other issues than they are from accidents. But the accidents are in there as well, and the incident of accidents is going to be higher. But if you care about your drivers as well and you want them to be around longer, it really does start with helping them get mentally healthy. And this is that part of this aspect of the discussion is that there are times where people throw their hands in the air, and on a couple of different fronts. One is I've heard certainly people talk about the nanny state, right, and the idea that it's my company, we're an employer. Of course we care, or we think we care, or we try to care. But at the end of the day, I'm their employer. Why does this matter to me so much? Why should it matter as much as it does to me about, this employee health piece of it. Is this really my purview? And then the other thing that I hear frequently is, well, what can you do? When it's your time, it's your time. Or if it's in your genes, maybe you're going to be obese because of that. Well, the real data on this shows that, and we've done I'm sure Tim and Jason probably have as well. I've done entire webinars just on this subject matter, but the vast majority of your health is within your control. Now, it's not to suggest that it's easy, and there's a lot of, you obviously have to be mentally healthy to take healthy actions that are going to lead to, a healthier lifestyle. But most of it's individual behavior. And then a big chunk of it is social circumstances and the environment and the medical care you get. A lot of that is within your control, within an employee's control as well. And a smaller piece of it, 22% or so, is the genetics in your biology. But even within your genetics, if you're genetically predisposed to have an issue, let's say hypertension, and you know that because your parents did, the question is how early on are you in tune with jumping on that issue and trying to treat it as something you can deal with and being proactive about it. And so, again, Jason, I'll jump out there for a second, just give it back to you. But this idea that you do have the control over a vast majority of what affects your health.
Absolutely. So when I started to change my life 7 years ago, I sort of went on my own personal crusade to look after my mental health and my well-being. I made some changes. Some were quite small, really helped. Learned how to go to sleep at night, sleep regime really helped. My diet, exercise, all these things really helped. And I think we can all make small changes, but that led to a big change. I led change 4 years ago when I stopped drinking alcohol. I made a decision one day. It wasn't serving me. It was creating most of my anxiety issues I was suffering from. We've been aspirated by my drinking. I chose not to stop drinking. And I thought about other things about my well-being, but again, I point back to my accident. I know categorically, if I'd been the person I am today, look after myself like I do today, I would not have done that job. So people say, why is it so important? In terms of work, does a good job. But I think we live in a society now where it's not just about work, it's about home life as well. There used to be like a disconnect. You used to finish work on a Friday at 5 and went home for the weekend, where now work follows around. Social media, we're at work all the time. Phone calls, text messages. We don't like people go on holiday, take the phones with them. So, we've lost that. And I think that's why even now the well-being piece is even more important, why we actually take care of ourselves. You mentioned blood pressure. In our family, my mum suffered with blood pressure. She's sadly passed away now. So I've took some proactive things. Yeah, I take a tablet every day, but I've stopped drinking. I look after my diet. I've taken some, as you mentioned, some proactive steps, not waiting for something to go wrong by the doctor. My blood pressure today is much lower, much more under control. And again, I took some proactive measures to counter what I knew about my own personal medical history, my genetics from my mum's side, but also the individual behaviors, I've taken now to look after myself as well. I don't drink caffeine anymore. So it's making some choices for yourself as well.
For sure. I haven't given up on caffeine. I have to admit that one, but it's helped me get through the day. But we'll take that one on next. There was a comment / question in the chat, and it was about the suicide rates. Do we know what the suicide rates are among drivers? And I have to admit, I don't, and I'm not sure if it's in that data. What I do know, and I just read this actually, and again, this will be part of our second session on the mental health side. But what I do know is that the leading cause of death among construction workers is suicide. Obviously, there's a lot of accidents in there that are issues as well, but far more deaths are caused by suicide as it relates to construction workers than accidents. So again, you tell me if you want to take on safety among construction workers, sure. Should you try to prevent accidents and injuries and make sure people are tied off properly and when working in elevated spaces and everything else? Absolutely. But how can you do that because you really care about their health and well-being and life expectancy, and not also jump in on the idea that they're far more likely to commit suicide than other workers, right? So it's something you have to address as a company, or should want to address as a company if you're trying to get to a result, for sure.
Yeah, and Tim will have some stats on that from the UK in his talk next week as well.
Excellent.
Especially in the construction industry. Yeah.
Great. Well, we're down about 5 minutes or so because we do want to wrap this up in a half hour. So I do, plus or minus. And if we don't get to questions or all the questions after, we'll be happy to do so. By the way, if you have questions, put them into the comments field. And if you want more information on any of this subject matter, just put your email address in the comments as well and just send it off to us, and we'll be happy to push. This session will be recorded and on LinkedIn Live, but if anybody wants more info, send us those questions and we'll definitely get to them as well. What I want to talk about on screen right now is that there are intrinsically motivated people, and there are others that can be motivated by extrinsic motivation that eventually leads to behavior change, right? So we see this all the time. The average American household is in 18 different customer loyalty programs. Those customer loyalty programs affect their behavior. Certain stores, certain restaurants, certain shopping sites will give you certain casinos, certain this, certain that. Take your pick, right? Certain your bank, what have you. They will recognize you, thank you, and reward you very often for taking certain behaviors. And those behaviors become more institutionalized. I mean, whether it's going to Starbucks for the coffee in the morning, or going to your gym in the afternoon, or participating in a wellness program. I'm in a wellness step competition right now. I'm actually in 2 different ones, one in my own company and one for among some friends groups, where we're tracking our steps and tracking our miles and what have you. And it's affecting my behavior on a very small scale, but a small scale is all we're looking for. It's nudges. So the one thing I want to talk about, obviously my business, All Stars business is, in the All Safe platform we built out, is all about employee recognition in the servitude of safety and well-being, right? We will recognize you for being a safer worker. We will recognize you for being a healthier worker. We will reward you for both. And by doing so over and over again, by rewarding you and recognizing you for getting that behavior-based observation, for doing that pre-shift stretching, for staying hydrated during the summer, for mentoring new employees, right? If I recognize you, thank you, reward you for those behaviors that make you healthier, that make you safer on the job, you start to do them inherently. Think of the guy that walks onto the job site every morning with the hard hat under his elbow and under his arm, and when he's on the job site and clearly putting himself in an unsafe position. When you reward that person for putting the hard hat on in the parking lot before he gets into the job site, and you do it over and over and over again, right? By positively reinforcing that behavior, you start to get more and more of that behavior. And so what we're really talking about here is using extrinsic. When they're intrinsically motivated, it's fantastic. It works great for everybody. But when you can use extrinsic recognition and rewards to get them to take the behavior over and over again, seatbelts are probably a great example, right? If you put your seatbelt on, if the car beeps at you and it aggravates you, sort of on the aggravating side, and you put that seatbelt on every time you get in the car before you drive, you eventually form a habit where even if the car didn't beep at you, you got a rental or what have you, you'll put the seatbelt on. So you eventually form the behaviors by being nudged in the right direction over and over again, and that behavior becomes second nature, and then you actually now have a new habit. Jason, anything to add on that?
A little bit, really. I think my whole piece around rewards and that is like, it's great. Obviously, different cultures, different continents have different views on this, what works. But I know in the UK especially, I think one of the biggest rewards we can have is a genuine thank you. I don't think any worker would, whatever we can offer is a genuine thank you and actually mean it. And it changes everybody. If I'm on a bad day, but I've come to it, got through it, and my manager really thanks me for what I've done and really means it, that can mean the world to me. It can make the difference of going straight home or going to the pub after work. So, all what he says is absolutely great, and it shows. And the other comment I want to make, obviously I've seen the slide deck before, again, on a sort of personal level, and what we really shout about Anchor Marshes is, for me, well-being doesn't form a part of that pie, if I'm totally honest. I think well-being should sit around it all. I think that's what we're aiming for. I think that's where we are now. I think the goal for us is that wellness and well-being just sits around the whole thing, because your well-being affects every single one of those charts. Your sales, before it fits everything. So when people say what's my goal, what's our goal, the work going forward is to create that where wellness just becomes a part of what we do. It's not I get it. I get the slide. I get the slide by saying this is a personal thing. That's what we want it to be. We want well-being just to be. That's how it is here. That's how these companies work. It's not something we do as in a task. It's just something that we do as a business. Yep. It informs our business. And if you want to recruit people, I worked in a couple of years ago for one of the big social media providers, and we had a floor of wellness. It was like breakout rooms, pool tables, rest areas. I said, if staff get tired, we can go into one of these pods and have a break for half an hour. And I said, wow, this is really like, I've not seen anything like this. And his comment was, if we want to recruit the best people, we have to provide this. So they've really got on board with the old wellness thing, well-being, as a part of attracting the staff they wanted, which I thought was brilliant.
I do as well. I think it's absolutely true. And you're absolutely right about this graphic. This graphic that we use frequently is meant to, it sort of refers to wellness and safety, among other things like peer-to-peer recognition, spot recognition, as spokes on a wheel, all related to employee engagement. But I couldn't agree with Jason more. There's other ways to represent it. And you can certainly represent it as wellness is the sheath that's around all of it, right?
Absolutely. It's a tie to the spokes, Brian.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And so you can look at it that way as well. I think that's the right way to look at it, because again, what's well-being, your mental well-being, your physical well-being, your financial well-being, your state of mind, as absolutely related to customer service and sales and every other aspect of what you do. It's just that when it comes to safety sensitive workers, you may have a bad day in sales because you're stressed and not dealing with it is one thing. A bad day in construction when you're climbing a ladder is a whole nother, right? So there are questions, by the way, in the chat. There are questions again about the session. Yes, it will be posted on LinkedIn, and you can watch it recorded after. And there's a question in there about how do we communicate about promoting and communicating these strategies to drive this type of engagement, right? So how do we use communication? And Jason, this is your sort of your wrap up slide, but I'll let you sort of hit that wrap up and talk about how do you basically, so we know we want to do it. How do we communicate it to our workforce and make it continually front and center?
To genuinely care. I think there's nothing more simple than that. To genuinely care about your co-worker, your employees. That's the difference. When I had my accident, I was late up. I'd been out the night before. My supervisor was picking me up. He actually had to come to my house and knock on my door to get me out of bed. So I was still hungover. Now, he must have known when I came down the stairs that something's not right here. He never spoke up, never asked what I was doing. I slept on the way to work on the back seat on the car, got on site, spent all day on the site, wandering around, and no one ever spoke to me, genuinely asked that question, are you okay? No one asked me. And yet once my accident happened, then everybody came forward and said, he's not been himself. We've noticed for a few weeks he's not been himself. I think he's been drinking too much. I think he's got marriage problems. So, there's the answer. If someone actually genuinely cared about me, my supervisor should have said, you're not fit for work today. And then come and see it on, we can talk about what's going off. If he genuinely cared about my safety, he would not allow me on site. If he had genuinely cared about my well-being, my issues outside work, he would have asked. So I think, that's the massive part. And again, Tim will mention this. Tim's developed a whole course on all care strategy. He calls it care. But we have to generally start caring about our employees. And if we do and get this right, they'll make a better worker, less absentee present, all those things we've mentioned. And safety falls into that category as well. Make it just a nice place to come to work, because that's where a lot of people spend the majority of their time. And if you have a good day at work, then you probably have a good day at home when you go home as well. So I think that's it for us. It's about making the whole holistic approach to the whole look. It's what you do at work, and it's what you do at home as well.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself, and hopefully Tim can jump on here real quick because we'll be closing this one down shortly, but also just wanted to talk about the next session. I guess my comment as Tim jumps on here, hey, Tim, my comment just about how do you communicate it is, just to finish up that point, is that it starts with caring, right? And Jason just made that point very clearly, right? I mean, first of all, you're not going to communicate it well if you don't care, right? You have to be mentally in a place where you say to yourself, okay, I get it. I absolutely do care. I don't want my employees working in risky situations under unhealthy conditions, and I care. The answer to the question from our perspective of how we communicate it is we build out an entire platform around it, right? So you can use your wellness program, your well-being program as a communication vehicle. Obviously, you can use your employee recognition reward program. It is a communication vehicle. Websites, emails, SMS messages, posters, catalogs, flyers, vouchers, social campaigns. When we build out these programs to promote safety, we envelop the work. We put a brand name on it, really, really crucial, and we envelop the audience in that message to make sure that everybody knows we care. and that it's top of mind, and it's not some half thought out strategy that the company's going to try this week and throw a pizza party next week. When we put these programs out there, we do it in a way that your employees take notice and realize this is really something that the company wants me to benefit from, and you start to see them over time really absorb that message. All right, with that said, we're at time, but before we go, I just wanted to welcome Tim Marsh. Tim is the other half of Anchor Marsh. Tim's joining me a week from today, as I said earlier, and really talking about the brain science side of well-being. And Tim, do you want to just say a few words about that session we have coming up?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Yes, I mean, for me, my session will be really trying to go into the methodologies that we're talking about here. Jason mentioned care. That's not care as in CARE. That's care as in CERR, and it's a methodology for anybody to talk to anybody about mental health. It means curious empathy followed by reflection, as in coaching, or referral, as in something more serious. And it's a key element of a holistic and integrated approach to the whole piece of well-being. You know, we talk about 1 in 5 struggling at any given time. We spend a lot of time talking about good work being good for you. And if you work in an organization that has lots of learning, lots of empowerment, lots of engagement, you can maybe turn that 1 in 5 into a 1 in 10. On the other hand, if you have I can hear all sorts. But if you work in a reasonably poor cultural environment, that 1 in 5 might be a 1 in 3. And the consequences of those figures you've covered at the start of this presentation. So my talk is, what exactly does a typical frontline leader need to do on a day-to-day basis to impact on those figures?
Yeah, that's great, Tim. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, folks, we're going to try to bring this all home, as Tim mentioned. You know, we talked obviously a lot about the physical side of it today, but it's all interrelated. And with Tim's help, Professor Marsh, we're going to talk more about that mental side of it a week from today and tie both those parts together. Happy to take any additional questions through LinkedIn after the fact. So you've got my contact information, Jason and Tim's as well. If you have other questions or comments, please share them. We will certainly respond to you between sessions, and I look forward to seeing hopefully everybody, most of you and more, at our session next week as well. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, audience. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.